a cohesive team. I thought that was a unicorn, a bit of an illusion.
Confusion is ugly, undermines teamwork and cohesion and kindness by its nature.
My first kick of the cat, if that's the phrase,
kick of the can.
was
Yeah, I hope you don't
can.
kick the cat. Don't kick the cat. We're animal lovers.
Welcome to the Serious Playfulness podcast, where we explore the work of building healthy, mission-driven organizations that don't suck the life out of you. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Stephanie. And if you secretly dream of a workplace that you actually want to go to, then you're in the right place. Let's get to work.
Welcome back to the Serious Playfulness podcast. We've had a break in production as we've worked on some staffing change. Basically, my children were our video editors and didn't enjoy the work. So we had to find someone else. And
now my child is the editor. We'll try that out.
True. Yes, this is not a small child, just to be clear.
Yes.
We don't employ 8-year-olds. Well, we might, but for dinner. No, I'm kidding. Yes. Great to be back. Stephanie and I today are going to talk about something that we'll call diagnostics, or maybe more playfully, getting clear about that which is not clear in your work and in your team. And the context for this is we have been increasingly proposing diagnostic phases in our work with new clients so that we can really know and help them know what isn't working and have better knowledge shared with them and us better knowledge about what isn't ideal, because these things are sometimes very subtle, nuanced. It's also easier from the business and sales perspective, easier to sell a smaller, more initial thing. And that sets all of us up for better movement forwards, whether they need our help or not. We thought it would be interesting, therefore, to talk about what we mean by this and what's involved and what you can take from this to help analyze your team. Sound good, Steph?
Yes, let's dive in.
So why don't you start off, Steph, with a little more riffing off of that on why it's important to understand what isn't working or what isn't clear and confusing. What isn't clear and what is confusing and what is not cohesive in your team.
I can quickly go to my experience as an executive director, where all I knew were the symptoms, the problems, but I didn't know the source of that, which meant I could tell our meetings were clumsy, ineffective, didn't feel productive, exciting conversation about our goals. Didn't feel like that. It felt like death by update. I suspected everyone, including myself, was biting their tongue to a certain extent,
Yes.
kind of stuffing frustration to present as professional. And so that was what I was experiencing. Now, what is the source of that? I don't know. It's
Right.
like if my car starts squealing, if I'm not a mechanic, I could probably not diagnose that, but I know the tire is squealing, or I
Yes.
know there's a whirring underneath my front end. I can spot that part. And I think that's the trouble I had as a leader, is I could tell that these are the symptoms I'm experiencing, but I'm not in the business of diagnosing, or I wasn't back then.
Yes.
I wasn't in the
Yes.
business of diagnosing. Well, where is that coming from? And so I couldn't identify that it was a lack of trust and candor on the team. I couldn't identify that it was a lack of clarity around what we're working on, which was producing a lot of the frustration and tension between, like, what are we doing and why?
And
Which is
also,
really what should have been said. Go ahead.
which included the board, some confusion with the board, just for the record. Please.
Yeah. And so that was another symptom. Me as the leader, I would wake up in the middle of the night stressed and anxious, or running scenarios and situations that I didn't know that was a byproduct of a lack of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't know how to diagnose it, but I really knew the symptoms.
Fascinating. Two things come to mind. One is that most of our clients share our worldview that there is a supernatural battle which affects everything, ultimately our soul, but is appearing in all areas of our life because we have an enemy. And often that is also in our teams at work. Because if our work can be gnawingly imperfect, that can lead to small ways where our enemy of souls can undermine our joy, our hopefulness, our cheerfulness, our service of other people, and how we show up to our families at home after work. And he works a la the Screw Tape Letters, if you know the C.S. Lewis book. He works in subtlety.
Yeah.
part of, therefore, what we're trying to do is to uncover some of that subtlety on the relational, operational, even psychological level. We're not psychologists or spiritual directors, but often these are very subtle things. Often they are at play in assumptions we make about our teammates, about behaviors that we are doing that we might not fully be aware of their effect. And all of this could be well-meaning, by the way. All the things you described in your former experience, these were great people with great intentions and high capability, nonetheless. And man, is it interesting to uncover the truth, essentially. And I like the car analogy. I'm looking out my window to a couple of cars, and that's a great analogy because we, as non-expert car operators, most of us, I'm one of those, so I can do a couple things in my car, but if I hear our engine light went on, no, it didn't actually. We were hearing a clunking noise and feeling a clunk when shifting in our minivan. It's an automatic transmission minivan. It's a good car. It's a Honda. And that's not a good sign. That usually means a transmission problem. And I've been around cars long enough to know that's an expensive problem. But no engine light came on. So that was weird. Usually it's the opposite. You see the engine light and then you're like, ooh, what's wrong? We just heard and felt something. And we took it to the mechanic and they went through all kinds of diagnostic tests and ironically found nothing.
Mm.
But it was great.
Mhm.
The point though is they didn't assume anything about what we told them. They asked us a few questions, of course, but then they put them through their rigorous testing. And thankfully, nothing came out. But by analogy, that's what we're talking about is it's great to have people with tools and expertise to test all of your assumptions and figure out what the thunk sound is caused by, per your point, Stephanie.
Mhm.
And I think what you found is that back in the day, well, maybe you should tell us some of the things you found. Obviously, some confusion, some ambient confusion, obviously some nuanced team dynamics, which we've probably talked about pretty adequately in other episodes. But what maybe how about this? What were a couple of things that helped you gain that clarity? And were you surprised? What was the experience like of learning about the causes of what you were experiencing?
I suppose by the time that that I hired you and you came in to work with us, I mean, I knew it must be something around the team. Like the team's not working great,
Right.
so we kind of know, similar to you, like, okay, I think it's the transmission, right? I think there's
Yeah.
something up here. It's making a noise. So I
Yeah.
knew a bit of the source of the problem. Still didn't mean I knew how to fix it.
Right.
And to rewind the clock, I was interested in team health. I was interested in a healthy culture and clarity, and I thought the effort I had put in towards that would have fixed it actually
Yeah.
over the year. A little team exercise here and a I don't know, a staff outing there and maybe a conversation on the board. And I just thought maybe that would be sufficient. So one of the solutions was having someone who really knew how to push forward for that clarity. And I've said this before, and I'll just say it again, that
Mhm.
once I had achieved a mission statement and a vision statement and a website that looked clear and good, I thought the organization was clear enough. I thought
Right.
we were united, and we weren't. And this is hard for me to imagine hearing 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Was, what do you mean that's not clear? And it wasn't. It really wasn't enough clarity. Or the team isn't strong. Well, we weren't fighting. We weren't having, we weren't throwing
Yes.
things at each other. But that is not the indication of a united, healthy team. And I really had that wrong. So I needed someone who knew that and who could say, hey, that actually looks a lot more like false harmony than a healthy, cohesive team. I didn't know that difference.
And I think what you're inferring, or more than inferring, basically saying is that part of it is you just didn't know what great looked like because you may not have
Yeah.
experienced it. Because a lot of us haven't. I remember talking with this was a Catholic priest one time years ago in a client setting, and I asked the team that he was leading, a question. I said, describe the best team you've ever been on, just so we have a reference about the experience of teamwork in the room, and also we can analyze it a little bit. And then he said, I've never been on one. And part of it was he's not a sports person.
Mhm.
Fair enough. But even on work teams, sometimes we just not experience great stuff. So we only know what we know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. My wife and I had a fascinating similar experience a couple weeks ago. We've been married over almost 25 years and had some irritation that had bubbled up and in some of our interactions. And it was kind of confusing. We didn't really know why it was as emotionally charged, especially for me as it was. On the surface, it didn't make sense. I knew there was stuff underneath from history and patterns, but I couldn't really fully understand it. And it was super hard to engage actually because it became very emotionally charged and loaded, even though again it was just an engine ping. But what we did is we reached out to my spiritual director and said, "Hey, can you mediate a marital conversation?" And he graciously agreed to do it. And it was extraordinary.
Mhm.
And he has expertise in human souls and people. And he also has Ignatian spirituality training, which is just very practical. And he just helped us see something that we could never see on our own.
Wow.
It was actually like stunning.
Yeah.
And I came out of that. I went into that conversation. Denise and I parked in a parking lot because our house isn't very soundproof, so it's hard to have a conversation like that and not have all the kids be able to hear it all.
Yeah.
And what if we start crying or yelling or or both? No. But joking aside, we wanted to be somewhere a little more discreet. So we drove down the road into a church parking lot and put Father Claude on a speakerphone. Man, he helped us see stuff we couldn't see. It's remarkable. And how did he
Well,
do
the
that? Yeah, go ahead.
the saying of you can't see the forest through the trees, and absolutely I can relate to that. Being so close to the problem,
Yeah,
being in the problem and being part of the problem,
yeah,
it's hard to see a way through it and to understand what is all at play. And that's where I
true.
think the diagnostic of a third party, someone who's outside, who has no emotions and no fear associated with that, no hopes and fears and all that loaded backstory, it's not there. They have
That's
such
great.
clarity in their perspective that that's a gift.
That's great. Yes. And in terms of how we do it, I would hope that most good consultants have something similar. We try, it's not easy, but we try to be totally impartial. And I think that's important. And I think those listening, if you're thinking of having someone help you, make sure they don't have a vested interest, which
Mm.
on a consultant side would be, are they really gunning for an upsell
Mm.
such that maybe they'll compromise how tough they'll be with you? Or I don't know what that might look like, but none of us is immune to that. We certainly fight to be like that, where I'm going to risk you not liking me or by telling you stuff that I think you need to hear, hopefully with kindness, but still, we sometimes tell people they're being cowards, right?
Mhm.
And we all need that. We all need the person in our life who's at least trying to love us that well, right? And for those listening who are in sales, because obviously we have listeners who run businesses and not just want to listen to things about teamwork or both. But I think this is a really smart idea is sell something that's small, that's useful, highly valuable, but easier to say yes to. And obviously that can lead to more, and it often does. Like the mechanic sells the engine inspection.
Yeah.
That's super helpful because I can go and pay $200 or whatever it might cost. Sometimes I do it for free. And then I have good information from which I can decide to do next things.
Hmm.
So we in our practice are working on refining that down. So it's the smaller, easier thing. Because what we then can subsequently do is often quite kind of big and expensive. It also builds a rapport and gives you a test in the working relationship, which is really nice.
It is. And I think thinking of the leader who might hear a few pings and grinds and whirs in their team, they to have a narrow focus of in this diagnostic process to say, I think we've got a problem in trust. I think it's coming from over here, or it seems to be a lack of clarity creating this, and just get a little bit of clarity around Where is the source of these
Yes.
noises?
Yes.
And then we can move forward and explore that. And that's where
Yes.
it can evolve. Or if the person decides, you know what, I think I want to explore that a little bit on my own, then they can try to,
Yes.
do that part themselves. But to figure out this is the problem or potential problem that produces symptoms like that.
Yes. And I've also noticed that the short-term discomfort of beginning those discovery steps in conversations is quickly overwhelmed by almost the freedom and the release that happens when you've named the thing. Because the thing is already causing you pain and frustration and stress, etc.
Already there.
But the hiddenness of it almost makes it have like 4x the impact because of this sort of mysterious unknown, maybe guilt around the fact that you haven't fixed it, confusion, wondering about the extent of it or what its causes are. But man, we just, the whole thing is what's the best disinfectant is sunlight. So get stuff into the light. And there's a spiritual principle there too. And it can be such a gift, such a release. I remember a client once I was basically documenting their problems on a flip chart page on the wall as we were going through. This is a more mature client engagement. And we were 6 months in or something. And I just wrote an issues list, it's a nice framework that I think the EOS guys use. Like, what are your issues? That's great. I love it. It's not whitewashed. It's honest. It's transparent. And I wrote about 8 things over the course of 4 hours. And the leader said to me, man, that list is so cathartic because we can just see it there. It almost simplifies and circumscribes the hemorrhage, the pain. And that's a gift. So I think the takeaway is figure out the causes of what's not going great. Get someone to help you do it if you need it. Usually that's definitely helpful. And then you have a list that you can work with rather than kind of wondering and having it fester in your minds and hearts and operations. Any closing thoughts, Steph?
Well, those sounds, those pings and tension and whirring noises in your team, just like in our vehicles, they don't just go away on their own and usually cause more problems. And I've lived it and I know it. So my encouragement to the person listening to that to pay attention, and it's worth attending to that now.
Hear, hear. See you next time. Thanks for listening.